And, you know, we were blessed. Senator Ducheney's with us in the audience today. She carried SB 1468 that allowed SR 11 to be tolled, and we can bond off those toll revenues to be able to pay for the infrastructure or pay for some of the infrastructure that will be necessary to make this new border crossing work and help us take advantage of the missed opportunity. We see this as a prototype, as do our national leaders, in terms of this may be a new way to help augment the funding for some of these border crossings. And we've started on that. Mr. Chairman, we're going to get a chance to tour some of this, I think, in the next couple of days with you down on the border. We've got the first segment under construction. Back to a point Hassan made, TCIF has been a critical tool in making the first segment that's here under construction available for us. We're targeting the second and third stage by 2017, and it does require extensive collaboration both at the national level, both not only with Mexico but the United States. Our governor has been involved in this. You know, when he went down to Mexico, I had the pleasure and the opportunity to join that delegation, and they created a working group that's really complementing a national group in terms of making sure that this project's a pretty high priority both at the national level and at the state level. So an opportunity to thank the governor for his support. So let me conclude by saying that you know, we see that economic competitiveness and efficiency can be had with border crossings like the one we're talking about at Otay Mesa East. The demand for cross-border trade is growing. It's a great opportunity to build a border crossing for the 21st century, and let me take this point to make a plug for right now if products, again, Mexico being California's largest export market, and right now we're exporting those products on a city street. We're going to get a chance to show you that, Mr. Chairman, later this week, that sometimes gets flooded and doesn't work very well, and you know, if we want to continue to grow this, we're going to have to do way better than a city street to get the products into Mexico. And we've done some TNR studies because we're going to toll this and we're going to go into the market to borrow money. And while we believe that the tolls will help pay for a significant portion of the investment, it's probably not going to cover all of the investment. So that's where we would definitely could use some help from the state. And to conclude, we see the TCIF program as being a good tool. I think it was a successful example of how we could invest in our goods movement needs throughout the state, and the $2 billion that was part of the TCIF program has been very helpful statewide. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Vegas-Walker?
I just wanted to add, I live with the border crossing daily in Imperial County, and the delays that Gary was talking about are very real. And if we could do even a fraction of the improvements that are planned would make a difference, both not only with regard to goods movement, and this is a little bit outside the scope of this, but just with regard to the health impacts of having that much wait time in one of the poorest communities in California would be extraordinary. So I'd like to leave you with that thought.
Thank you very much. And this is kind of a generic question for the panel. Embracing technology, how can we utilize technology to facilitate this process?
I'll start. I think technology is going to play an important role in how we choose to add capacity. I think technology probably is going to double, sometimes triple the capacity of the system if we deploy it right with some capacity increases. Intelligent transportation system in freight especially is so important when it comes to truck communication, on-demand services. And I don't know whether you know this, but we're beginning actually to see an Uber for trucks now. We need to kind of build on that kind of on-demand services for areas like ours, which has hundreds of thousands of trucks daily. And like Gary said, not only we add the capacity with future technological advances in mind, we have to be aware of also when the technology is available. And you ask rightly so the question about how much money do we have for research and development. That portion need to be beefed up, because we really, if we want to do it fast, we need that research to take place.
I'll just touch briefly on, we need to find improvements on how we transition the trucks through the border. And so if we can come up with more intelligent ways of screening cargo and just speeding the throughput would be a tremendous help.
And I would just add that with this new border crossing being a tolled border crossing, that it offers a new opportunity for us in California. That's the first time that we've tolled really a crossing where people have to pay. And so providing real-time information to customers is going to be critical to the success of this new border crossing. So we have been working hand in hand with our Mexican counterparts to put in an ITS infrastructure technology. Because if you're going to pay to cross, well, you got to then know what the value of your time is. If you could cross, faster on the toll crossing, well, how much faster is going to be a very important decision on whether you choose to pay that toll or wait in line on a free border crossing. So we see technology as being really critical to the success of this new border crossing. And then just to build on Cheryl's comment that we also think that there's way better ways to secure products that are being generated at the factory, thereby making the border crossing itself more effective and more efficient without reducing the threats or security. And I think technology is going to help us do a way better job, but we've got to invest in it to make it happen.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, just, if you look at the connected vehicle technology or that control the spacing between trucks, I mean, it's from an engineering standpoint, you could quadruple the capacity actually by that technology actually exists, like you rightly so mentioned. If we put some research and development money to accelerate it, we would add a lot of capacity, especially for truck movement.
Well, I thank you for that, because one of the things that I'm looking at as a possibility, and please help me here, is when we make these goals and we want to attain something, and we reach out to our stakeholders and say, how can we best get the best value of what we're trying to accomplish? Is it reducing bottlenecks at these crossings versus filters on trucks? What is the best value of the investment going forward, where it can be an increase in efficiencies and also reductions to the harmful to the environment. So is there a dialogue that says, well, we know what you're trying to attain, but we think you can get better value by this? Like a white paper almost to the agencies that are putting these restrictions or goals on you.
Yeah, and the answer is yes. And this is about prioritizing based on some performance objectives that one define. If the state of California say these are the outcomes we need to achieve, regions have the capacity actually, whether it's SANDAG at San Diego or SCAG or MTC or Sacramento, we have the capacity to do this kind of evaluation, that kind of exercise. What's the best investment you could do for the money you're spending? The most important thing is to have the performance objective, the outcomes very clearly defined, what it is we need to accomplish.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that I think you have touched on something that in general government doesn't do very well. And, we tend to silo ourselves. And so the enforcement guys are worried about enforcement, the transportation guys are worried about traffic movement. And even within the legislature, sometimes we'll see that a policy that's good for the environment might not, to share a real example, I think the transition to zero emission vehicles is probably one of the fastest and best things we could do to help save our climate. But at the same time, when you look at, well, then how do we pay for the potholes and things that we fix, because those get paid for through the gas tax? Well, if you have cars that are not paying any to the gas tax, so we can have policies that sometimes conflict with each other, even though on their own each policy is very meritorious. And I think we struggle with this in government in general. And so when we look at these, how do we break down the silos? And let me share one example that at least gives me some hope at the border crossing, that the two governments are now talking about building a shared facility. a shared facility so that not only are Mexican trucks going to be inspected, but U.S. trucks, and they're going to be inspected all in one facility. So you start looking at the efficiencies that we can get out of that instead of having to build 2 scales and 2 X-ray machines. Now can we capture the data and pass it to several different silos? But let me tell you, Mr. Chairman, this is really a hard, even though, and sometimes in Spanish there's the saying that if you're good with God, forget the little angels. But the reality is the little angels make a difference because the little angels can determine the really quality of life. And there's a struggle in this role on, at the highest policy levels, we want a joint border crossing. But at the working level, the idea of how we're going to get this done and be able to break down the silos, because in government we've grown up around our silos, I think it's a real challenge and something that needs some attention. Throughout the state in a bunch of different areas, whether it's what we're doing with CARB versus what we're doing with CTC versus, what we're doing with the Energy Commission as an example. And I think these dots do connect, but we do a poor job of connecting those dots. And sometimes we may have, policies that are good policies, but they're working counter to each other.
And Mr. Chairman, just not to repeat, just to build on what Gary said, you're putting your hand in probably one of the most important things for the state of California to do. And that is, you have all these multiple interests and multiple agencies that does things, but we're talking about investment into the future, and that require infrastructure investment, that require technology deployment, that require environmental achievement, and all of that cannot be achieved unless you have performance objectives outlined from the get-go. So I applaud you by even attempting to ask this question, because like Gary said, this has been one of our issues, is we're siloed in too many ways in a lot of things we do.
I appreciate that because of the time that the Long Beach ports and the LA ports took to show me the great accomplishments they've done in reduction, even before ARB was even a thought. And so we've gone and strived to make all these reductions, but as soon as somebody leaves their gate, we have a loss. We haven't gained anything because that individual is idling on the 710 or wherever it is throughout Southern California. So I'm looking for opportunities that we can continue to look at best value. If we can create an expedited manner of getting freight out, and it also reduces particulates and greenhouse gas and everything that we're hoping for, that's where I'd like to see the investment versus making industry, at this point, bear the brunt of it. So that's my looking forward to.
For you, Mr. Chairman, the committee members, California is still the #1 manufacturing center in the country. And for that, whether it's in the border crossings or within the state's travel, we're talking about a lot of movement related to manufacturing inside California. And for that reason, we do need to prioritize those things you're talking about.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come all the way up to this hearing. You guys are invaluable to me and this committee with your expertise. And I look forward to the collaboration, working forward to making this happen. So thank you. Yeah.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing that it's not all about just getting us to move to electric trucks. We just shifted into alternative fuels, LNG, over the last 10 years. It's been a heroic effort. You've seen a sea of change down there. You don't drive down the 710 and see a 10, 11-year-old truck anymore. They just don't exist in the Southern California region by and large. And that's because of the efforts we've made down there, coming from Long Beach.
Absolutely.
Okay, representing the 2 ports in the state assembly. But I also appreciate your recognition that we need to take a look at other innovations and how we move the goods. It isn't just it isn't just the truck that moves the goods. It's how we load the truck and how we keep that truck moving, how we speed up our logistics, if you will, Pier Pass, et cetera. So I appreciate your recognition of that. Thank you.
That's what touring does. So thank you so much. We'll move on to the next panel. David Labatique, Mike Jacob, RJ Cervantes, and Lisa Lawson-Stark, and Weston Labar. Thank you for coming this afternoon and sharing with us this wonderful Monday. So we'll start off with David. Please introduce yourself and give us your title and what you do. That's the next one.
Thank you, Chairman Frazier and committee members and staff. The Port of Los Angeles is grateful for the invitation to participate in this important hearing. We were honored, and it was our pleasure to host you down at the San Pedro Bay Port Complex. We hope you enjoyed it. We did. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to discuss the importance of goods movement here today, the challenges we face, and the actions that can be taken to continue supporting this sector and the broader economy. The Port of Los Angeles, as we probably hammered home many times over presentations and discussions we gave to you on your tour, is the busiest container port in the nation and in the state. We have 27 terminals, 270 berths, 88 container cranes. Massive infrastructure investment has been made in the San Pedro Bay Port Complex. In 2014, we handled 8.3 million containers. And one point that often gets lost, and one of my favorite comments from a local community member has always been, what do I need a port for? I have Walmart. And the broader point being that the cargo that travels across our docks reaches every corner of this country. So even if you don't have a port in your backyard, there's probably a store or a business in your district that receives or sends finished goods or raw materials through our port complex. And so the economic impact of port activity in the San Pedro Bay is profound. Over $89 billion in trade value in California, $6 billion in state and local taxes generated throughout the state of California, supports 1.2 million jobs in California. And keep in mind, we are only one of 11 publicly owned commercial ports in California that serve as maritime gateways to the state's economy. And so collectively, the California ports have a massive impact on the local, regional, and statewide economy, as well as the national economy. However, we face significant challenges. We're facing increased competition. Certainly, we have to address environmental impacts, and we're seeing profound industry changes occurring. First, on the increased competition, our competitive landscape is changing. Competition for discretionary cargo, that's the cargo that comes through our ports but does not need to come through our ports because it's destined for other markets across the country. Competition for that cargo is intensifying. Ports in Canada and Mexico are expanding to grow their market share. The Pacific Northwest ports are restructuring to compete more aggressively for cargo. And the expansion of the Panama Canal is going to put us into more direct competition with the U.S. Gulf and East Coast ports. Second, as was discussed earlier, environmental challenges remain. We have successfully worked in collaboration with our customers and with the air agencies to develop and implement the Clean Air Action Plan, which has greatly reduced criteria pollutants at the port and yielded GHG reduction co-benefits as well. However, we realize, especially with the OEHA standards and with the remaining challenge of reducing greenhouse gases and criteria pollutants, that more is going to be needed. This is going to be a formidable challenge. Third, what we've seen over the past year, the maritime shipping industry is undergoing profound change. The advent of larger ships, the formation of carrier alliances have been contributing factors to recent congestion at our port complex, but not just our port complex, but complex at ports around the world. In response, we're working closely with our supply chain partners to identify and implement solutions to help avoid future disruptions and attain greater supply chain efficiency. Given these challenges, the current development of an integrated state freight strategy combined with funding support from the state can help mount a response to keep California's competitive edge. First, we need a dedicated, sustainable source of funding for freight infrastructure. Priority should be given to projects in key corridors and gateways, including projects, terminal modernization to accommodate the newer, larger vessels, on-dock rail that takes trucks off the road, improved first and last mile infrastructure, grade separations, and improved connectivity between ports and regional warehouses. We believe that the Trade Corridor Improvement Fund Program framework is a good vehicle, is a good framework for continuing investment in this regard. Second, to achieve additional emissions reduction, we seek support for the use of cap and trade funding to help us in the development, testing, and deployment of ZE and of zero emission and near zero emission technology. And as this technology increases, measures to ensure energy efficiency and resiliency, including the installation and use of energy efficiency lighting, renewable energy, and microgrid, will also be important, especially in settings that can be replicated across the supply chain. Third, in response to the changes we see in the maritime shipping sector, the ports of LA and Long Beach have engaged in a collaborative working group called the Supply Chain Optimization Working Group. This is done under the auspices of the Federal Maritime Commission. This group was formed to develop and implement and evaluate supply chain efficiency measures. These measures could yield benefits both in terms of system productivity as well as emission reductions. We ask that the state consider support for the ideas that evolve out of this supply chain optimization working group. I think some of these were mentioned before. We're looking at IT solutions such as maybe broader application of Freightus, which is Freightus, the Freight Advanced Travel Information System, which is going to help with drayage optimization so you're not getting empty movement of trucks between warehouses and terminals. We're looking at Cargomatic and Quick 180, these IT solutions that can extract more capacity out of the existing infrastructure. And final and last point is that as we evaluate the success of the state's role in supporting goods movement, we would recommend metrics that capture the sector's contributions to the state economy. That in addition to metrics that capture freight mobility as well as emissions reduction. Is the freight sector continuing to contribute to growth in the state economy? Is it healthy? Is it robust? And metrics that capture that we think are necessary, and we'd like to see those part of the scoreboard, so to speak, when we look at California's freight strategy. Again, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this hearing, and I look forward to any questions.